Hello there and welcome to another Döhle Yacht Coffee Break. Today I'm joined by Joe Assell, who's our Technical Director, and Brendan O'Shaughnessy, who's Fleet Operations for Döhle. What we want to talk to you today about is the key stakeholders in the beginning of new build processes. So guys, we might as well jump straight in. How do new projects come about?
Thanks, Ben. Really, it comes from the desire of someone who wants to buy a yacht. They express this desire to an introducer. The introducer might be a broker that sales or their previous charter broker they had a great relationship with. They might be an existing yacht owner, then go through their captain potentially. Could be one of their friends who is a yacht owner. Sometimes it just comes out of the blue, literally through the wider press. Joe, how have you found it?
Yeah, I think absolutely that role of the introducer is very important and can be completely varied, as you say. We often also find that an owner, through either an introducer or off their own back, through something they've seen, as you say, like the press or an experience they've had, maybe through a charter boat, will also approach directly to either a designer. So they may have seen an incredible design that they've been inspired by, or through being on board one of their boats during a charter or a friend's boat. So we often see approaches direct to designers. And another growing side of it is a direct approach to a shipyard. Shipyards are starting to position themselves within the market as a brand. So although a lot of these fully custom shipyards are just that, and they can build you whatever they want, there's still a weight or an impetus behind the type of boat that they can build for you, and certain shipyards are positioning themselves to attract an owner who wants a type of vessel that's from that shipyard, and we're seeing that growing as well as a way of introducing an owner into the industry.
Absolutely. The brand recognition there is getting stronger and stronger, rightly so, some would say, rightly so.
I think, guys, just to hint on, and maybe it's a stupid question, but it's something that we get a lot of confusion about in the industry. I mean, you talk there about a designer, but can you talk to us about like the difference then between an interior and an exterior designer?
Yeah, sure. I mean, they are different roles. Now, there will be design studios who will take on both, and there'll be others that are very siloed in an approach, and they say, no, I'm going to do one or the other. But an interior designer is really styling what's already been presented to them, okay? Whereas an exterior designer is normally responsible, as it suggests, for the exterior of the boat. But in order to design the exterior, you're also responsible for the layout, okay? So the actual way in which the rooms flow, the way that they connect. So it's important to understand that your exterior designer is actually responsible for the layout, and your interior designer is responsible for your finishes, your soft furnishers, and your furniture. There's a lot of different aspects that need to go into both, but understanding what you're contracting your designer for, or what a designer is responsible for, is an important part of that relationship.
Absolutely. And Joe, being a naval architect yourself, they feed into that group as well. Tell me about how you see the naval architect working with the exterior designer, for example.
Yeah, it's really important interaction with the naval architect. I mean, a designer or an exterior designer can't take a concept too far without engaging with a naval architect. Now, a naval architect, for those who aren't aware, will be responsible for the kind of the engineering and the physics behind how a vessel actually works. So a naval architect is going to be looking at the actual hull shape to make sure that it's going to float and stay upright. It achieves the speed that we want it to achieve, and also starting to look at segregation of the vessel through watertight bulkheads to meet certain regulations, as well as fire divisions, and a hint at some of the regulatory requirements that are going to need to be met. So the designer can only take a design so far before a naval architect needs to be involved. Now, some studios will have that relationship set up, whereas others, it would be the responsibility of the owner to find a naval architect to work with, or potentially through the shipyard. Once we get further down the line, more engineering is done at that stage.
So a question, I mean, you kind of hinted on it there then. So how do these, the yards work with these third-party designers?
Oh, I hark back to joining my first new build project. I was really confronted by how many people sat at the desk, how many stakeholders were in there. And what I did see was very professional design studios, interior and exterior, always communicating because their vision overlaps time to time. What I also saw was at points negotiation with a builder or a naval architect, and I'd be looking at a general arrangement version 1.0, looking at a space that is now filled with HVAC machinery, for example. And I was quite confronted back then. Why did it change? Where did that go? So there was a lot of interaction between design studio, naval architecture, and then the next stage, the production in the shipyard that had to execute this and meet compliance standards.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think touching on there, the loss of space during a build is hugely common. And I don't know a project maybe that has been from concept design through to completion that wouldn't have space lost to HVAC, to a technical area, to deck stores. And that's because of the way that we often end up starting these projects. It starts as, let's just experiment with a new design, let's talk to a designer, and the designer would start mapping out some thoughts, and it's just at the moment it's just ideas on a piece of paper. And then as it grows, all of these different influences need to be brought in at the right time. So we've discussed the naval architect, but what about the engineering platform? Do we have enough space in the engine room for the engines to go the desired speed of the client once we start talking about those kind of parameters? Can we actually operate the vessel properly? I mean, the amount of vessels, Brendan, you must have been on whereby the galley is fundamentally in the wrong place and we can't even get hot food up to the the second dining room or to the owner's suite where he likes to have breakfast or whatever it is. And I think having that crew interaction as well at the right time in the design, the initial design, must also be really important.
Oh, absolutely. I think the operational input, whether it comes from a potential future crew or just someone with an operational awareness of how it's going to function, it saves so much time, effort and cost if it's done on paper in the very early stages. The next bit is someone who can advise you on the class obligations. I've had very large investment areas of a yacht reversed because no one had actually understood the implication on the regulations. So those two sides, what is the operator going to do? Is there enough people? Does it flow? Does this concept work? Great. Then, are the legalities being upheld?
Yeah, just to jump in there, the legality side of it, the class and flag requirements are such an important aspect to address early on in the design phase, because the worst thing that we can do as a team when we're working with these introducers, when we're working with the client, is put something in front of them that he absolutely falls in love with. There could be this incredible feature that is 3 decks high and he drives his boat into it and there's flames everywhere and there's a waterfall and it all looks absolutely incredible on the renderings. But not only do we have to comply with the rules of physics, but we also need to make sure that this is a certificated, internationally trading ship that can go anywhere. And to achieve that, we have to meet certain regulations. Now, we might be able to achieve all of that, but we got to get in there at the beginning and make sure that the designer can tweak it enough to make sure that we can actually pass those kind of scrutinies from class and flag.
So,
sorry.
Go on, no, because I know at the time we're kind of running out of time as well a bit here for our coffee breaks. And I mean, there's so many subjects that we will dive into from this that I think will follow on from further coffee breaks. I suppose I just wanted to kind of finally bring up that last question of how do you see the future developing of the relationships between the yards and these designers as we move forward?
I think, well, firstly, that the way in which a yard and a designer works is different almost every time. So every project is different, every design house is different. We talked about whether they're an interior designer, an exterior designer. where the designer stops his job and where the yard starts his job is a very important relationship to understand. It could be that they stop at the concept, the rendering, this is what I want to achieve. They could go into detailed drawings that show the concept of the interaction between the cornicing, the door frames, how the air conditioning units are going to work. And then the final stage is the actual construction drawings in each space to show how you're going to build those to give to the interior outfitting contractor. And that relationship and where the designer stops and the yard or outfitting contractor start is different on every project. So knowing what you're paying for from a client perspective is important. And those relationships and those boundaries are constantly changing. And I think will continue to do so. There are shipyards who are taking more in-house, and there are also those who recognise that they don't have the manpower or skill sets to do that detailed design and are rightly farming that back out to the designers or a design studio. So I think that will continue. Naval architects have an interesting role in this process as well. And does a owner's naval architect who's been involved in the project at the beginning has an important role to play throughout the project for weights and centres, for changes in the design, for often regulatory compliance. But a shipyard, to mitigate their risk, is often doing this work as well. So we sometimes end up doubling up on a little bit of work. So the boundaries on how everyone's going to work are something that needs to be established right at the beginning of the project in order to actually make sure it's a smooth process that Brendan talked about at the beginning.
Okay, guys, thank you very much for a very useful insight today. So, guys, as always, for you that are listening, if there are any questions or queries that you have that come from this, our details will be at the end of the coffee break. And thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Brendan. Thanks, Ben.